Chapter 9. The following morning, Ranofer crept to the shop, sore in every muscle, with the old familiar strips of fire across his shoulders. As he had expected, Gaboo had not believed the simple truth that he had forgotten to collect his wages. The added truth which might have convinced him, the story of the visit to Za, Ranofer had stubbornly withheld. He had paid a high price for his silence, but even a beating was preferable to turning his heart and hopes inside out for Gaboo's scornful inspection, seeing them withered with ridicule and blown away like dust before his eyes. He had little enough hope left in him as it was, after the conversation with Za. Gaboo came into the shop in the middle of the morning, snarled ill-naturedly at Pi, and stalked about inspecting the work in a manner that caused every man to bend closer to his chisel or drill, and all conversation to cease. Ranofer, scrubbing away with sandstone at a chunk of quartzite, dared not glance around when Gaboo paused beside a half-finished stone coffin only a few feet away from him. His very skin shrank in an effort to put more distance between himself and his half-brother, but he could not help being aware of the voices of Gaboo and Pi gradually raised in argument until they could be heard even over the clatter of the shop. "You, Ranofer!" Pi roared suddenly. Ranofer dropped his sandstone and looked around fearfully. "That scroll on the lower shelf, the plan of the judge's tomb. Fetch it. Hurry." Ranofer hurried, as much as the soreness of his legs allowed, to the storeroom at the far end of the shop. There were 5 scrolls on the lower shelf, with hands made clumsy by haste. He unrolled one after another. From being ordered often to bring some particular scroll to Pi, he had become superficially familiar with these drawings, which at first had looked like meaningless bird tracks to him. All tomb plans were similar in design, but he could now tell one from another by recognizing some detail. The judge's was the one with the narrowest entrance passage and only 2 rooms beside the burial chamber. It was the last he picked up. He snatched it and returned to Pi, who took it without a glance. Ranofer was glad to be ignored, gladder still to be safely back at work when a moment later Gaboo's voice rose in angry bellow directed at Pi. "You see, imbecile? The coffin is too wide. I told you. Perhaps you would care to chip away the sides of this passage on the day of the burial." "It is easy enough to alter the coffin," Pi answered sulkily. "Then alter it, and hereafter heed what I say, or I will find a foreman who will." Gaboo stalked past Ranofer with nothing more than a glare, and Pi followed, thrusting the scroll at Ranofer as he went by. As Ranofer scrambled down from his stone to take the scroll back, he saw Pi at the pay box counting out to Gaboo the coppers from yesterday, and those for today as well. "He means to take no chances that I will forget tonight," Ranofer thought as he started for the storeroom. "Cursed one! What does he care for my coppers, except to make sure I do not get them? If only I could keep them, I could hide them away and some day buy a donkey. But he does not even need them, especially these days when he swaggers about in fine headcloths and new-made sandals. He has 2 pairs of sandals now, one with buckles, like a judge's. Aye, and he eats fish often, and salted waterfowl. I can smell them in the storeroom at home, and he reeks always of wine or barley beer." Ranofer's thoughts paused in surprise. He stood in the storeroom, and the scroll forgotten in his hands, and considered those things. Until now he had paid them no attention. Certainly Gaboo seemed to be increasingly well-to-do. The sandals, the headcloths of fine linen, several of them, yes, and for some time Gaboo had reeked of expensive ointments as well as barley beer. "My coppers cannot have made all that difference," Ranofer reflected. Perhaps the fan-bearer had paid a great sum for that red granite coffin with the alabaster lid, or else Pharaoh must have rewarded the stonecutters handsomely indeed for the work on the temple. How else could the cursed one have grown rich so suddenly, unless he was stealing again? The instant the idea occurred to Ranofer, he was sure it was the answer. A remark of Gaboo's sprang into his mind. Him and his paltry wineskins. There are far bigger birds in the air than Wreck the goldsmith. Obscure at the time they were spoken, the words were now as clear to Ranofer as the shape of the shelves in front of him. Gaboo had found some other goldsmith to rob, and no doubt a better, safer way to do it. No wonder he had needed the Babylonian no longer, and scarcely taken notice of his dismissal. The new scheme must have been already in operation. Ranofer thrust the scroll onto the shelf and hurried back to his work, filled again with the hope that he had thought almost quenched yesterday. This time, if he found Gaboo out, he would make sure of his proof. He would find witnesses. Better, this time he had friends who might help, not only Haket, but the ancient. He could scarcely wait until midday. When it came at last, he ran at full speed to the thicket, disregarding his soreness and passers-by alike. He ran so fast that he was the first to arrive in the little green room and had to wait, fuming with impatience and groaning a little in spite of himself at the flames he had stirred to life across his shoulders. Presently, however, Haket and the ancient arrived together, speaking in low tones as they came along the shaded little path. With the soft-eyed donkey plodding a bit behind him, Ranofer suspected Haket had been telling the old man about what had happened at Zaz, no doubt feeling he must explain beforehand Ranofer's probable gloom. They both looked surprised when Ranofer jumped to his feet and pulled them through the reeds into the little clearing, urging them to sit down quickly and listen. "Gaboo has been beating you again," Haket said, with a sharp glance at his friend's shoulders. "Aye, because I forgot my coppers yesterday, but I'm glad I did, because it made me think. Now listen to me." The story poured out: Gaboo's sandals, his headcloths, his ointments, his peculiar remark to Wenamon months before. Haket and the ancient mechanically performed the usual ritual of dividing what food there was, but their attention was riveted on Ranofer. Haket grew so excited that by the time Ranofer paused for breath, his snub-nosed face was transformed, and he could scarcely sit still. "You are right. I know you're right. Isn't it so, ancient? How else could a man become so rich in a few months? Unless Pharaoh had singled him out for favor. And that one is as likely to be singled out by Pharaoh as I am to lose my appetite overnight. Here, Ranofer, take one of these loaves and some grapes. Now what shall we do about it?" "I don't know," Ranofer answered, realizing for the first time that he had no idea of how to proceed. "Now what shall we do about it?" "I don't know," Ranofer answered, realizing for the first time that he had no idea of how to proceed. He glanced questioningly at the ancient, who was old and must therefore know a great deal about everything, but he found the old man looking both thoughtful and dubious. The doubt was contagious. Ranofer turned away quickly and said in a louder tone than he intended, "But we can do something. That much is certain. We can find out more. I will watch Gaboo, see where he goes." He was talking at random, but Haket pounced on the words. "Aye, that's it. Follow him as often as you can. See who he talks to. Try to hear what they say. His companions, we must discover his companions. That skulking Wenamon is surely part of the scheme. Perhaps I could watch him. He lives but a step from the apprentice's quarters. We will become spies. Who else is Gaboo's friend? Or does he have any others? There is a river captain, of course. I do not know if he has anything to do with this." "Aha! A river captain!" Haket was in transports. "Naturally, there would be a river captain. Do you see? They must smuggle the gold out of the city in some way, perhaps to Abydos. They would not dare barter raw gold here for headcloths or sandals. Someone would soon ask how they came by it. Do you agree, ancient?" "Aye, that is doubtless the way they would do it," the old man said slowly, so slowly that Ranofer stole another anxious glance at him. Haket was already talking again. "The ancients can spy on the river captain. What could be easier? He is here near the river all day. He goes each evening to the sailmakers by the docks. An excellent idea. Ast! What a bright fellow I am, as the stone said when it looked into the copper mirror. What's the river's captain's name?" "Setma." "Setma?" the ancient echoed. "Do you know him, ancient?" "Aye, I know him. I do not like his sort." "Wenamon is worse," Ranofer said quickly. "And Gaboo worst of all," Haket said. Once more Ranofer searched the old man's face. "Now do you believe all this?" he ventured. "I never said I did not believe you, young one." "You have not said much of anything at all," Ranofer said uncertainly. "Nay, I have not." The ancient sighed and picked up Haket's knife to slice a lotus root. "I fear for you, two hotheads, mixing yourselves up with dangerous business. What if these men catch you spying on them? It would go hard with you." "But we will be very careful," Haket exclaimed. "I mean to be a spy worthy of any noble's hire, silent and invisible." He glanced challengingly at the ancient. "Of course, old one, if you are afraid—" The ancient's face relaxed into its usual good-natured creases. A slow grin turned into his high-pitched cackle. "May the gods love you, boy. What should I be afraid? No one takes any notice of an old, one-eyed nobody like me. I could tread on a man's heels for weeks before he'd suspect me of being dangerous." "It is the same with us," Haket argued eagerly. "Who takes notice of boys, especially ragamuffins?" "You are no ragamuffin, Haket," Ranofer said with an admiring glance at his friend's new shanty, which was of firm-woven linen. His own was the flimsiest cotton, and tender in every fibre from long wear. "I am no Lord High Fan-bearer either," retorted Haket, "though of course we both have our natural beauty, as the hippopotamus said to the rat." Haket snatched up a bunch of grapes and held them across his throat like a necklace. Meanwhile, assuming an expression of such conceited hauteur that both Ranofer and the ancient burst out laughing, he flung the grapes down and went on. In any case, I am paid no more attention than 1,000 other boys in Thebes. And neither are you, Ranofer. We need no magic to make us invisible so long as we do not actually stumble over anyone's feet. For my part, I am ready to be Wennemon's shadow any day and night, except when I am at the Gold House, of course. And even there, he stopped and his face lighted with a new idea. What is it? Ranofer prodded him. Why, I have just realized something. I can do much more to help you. You know yourself, Ranofer, when gold is missing from any gold house in the city, the others learn of it. The smiths warn each other. Aye, that is true, Rex said sensata to his brother's shop and others down the street. Exactly, very well. Then I will keep my ears open. I will grow ears like the donkey yonder. If word comes of thievery in anyone's shop, I will know which one. Now that is a good plan, the ancient said emphatically. That will accomplish something, possibly. Haket, the irrepressible, glared at him an instant and then growled deep in his throat like some very small, fierce dog. You do not think my spying plan of any value, then? He demanded. Aye, of inestimable value, the old man cackled, shaking his head, until his thread-like hair quivered. Spy all you like, young one. You are probably right. No one will notice your antics. You might even find out something. And you will watch the river, Captain? Aye, I'll watch him, though it will not be a pleasant sight, I assure you. Then you will watch Gaboo, Haket said to Ranofer. I will do my best, but I think he will notice if I try to follow him. Aye, that's a problem in your case, it's true. No matter, I will try it anyway, Ranofer said. All he can do is beat me and send me home. He hoped it was true. He did not really know what Gaboo would do if he realized Ranofer was prying into his affairs, and he preferred not to think about it. Something of the sort must have passed through Haket's mind, for he said uneasily, Take great care, though. Well, it is all arranged, then. Will we meet here when we can, as always, and tell each other what we have learned? Agreed? Agreed, Ranofer said solemnly. Agreed, the ancient echoed, not solemnly at all. He was still chuckling now and then under his breath, and Ranofer suspected that he looked on the whole plan as a child's game. As they left the little green room to separate to their work, however, he beckoned Ranofer down the path in the direction of the shrunken river, and the familiar twinkle in his one eye had vanished. Come with me a moment, young one. He left the path presently, and pressed through the trackless growth of rushes and bushes, which he had seemed to know as well as Ranofer knew the street of the Crooked Dog. At a place where the undergrowth ended and the papyrus began, the water's edge in winter, now a stretch of mud, he stopped beside a spreading patch of some low green plant. Stooping, he gathered a handful of the leaves and crushed them with a little mud in the palm of his hand. Then he turned Ranofer about and very gently smeared the mixture on his shoulders, where the fire still burned. Instantly they cooled. The relief was so great that tears sprang into Ranofer's eyes. He looked wonderingly at the old man, whose gentle touch seemed as great a magic as his salve. The ancient smiled. I have not much wisdom, but I know a few things, he remarked. Now I want a promise from you about this spying, young one. Will you give it? Aye. Do not follow this Gaboo of yours after full night has fallen. Men can come and go in the darkness, and often no harm comes of it. But you are not yet a man, and the Kefts fly away with children, half-grown boys like you. Do not risk it. It would be better to spend your life as a stone-cutter. That is true, ancient. I will not risk it. Well, then, be off with you. He is right, Ranofer reflected as he hurried back to the shop. I will tell Haket, too. Haket fears nothing. He might not even remember the Kefts. A moment later, though, he realized that Haket would do no dashing about after Wennemon at night, even if he should want to. The doors of the apprentices' quarters were locked and sealed at nightfall, and there were no exceptions to the rule. They would have a few hours in the day for following and watching. Still, much could be done between the end of work and the coming of full dark, which was later now than in the winter seasons, and think what it might mean if they could discover something. Ranofer was determined to begin that very evening. He went directly home at the day's end, with none of his usual reluctant dawdling. Gaboo was there. Ranofer could hear him moving about in his room at the top of the stairs, but he did not come down. Why should he? Thought Ranofer resentfully. He already has my coppers for today. He found supper in the storeroom, drank from the water jar, and settled himself under the acacia tree, prepared to watch every motion Gaboo made, if he could come into sight. He did not come into sight for what seemed an interminable length of time. Ranofer's eyelids were drooping and his head nodding when he heard the upper door suddenly open and footsteps come down the stairs. Every sense alert, he watched Gaboo walk across the courtyard, open the gate, and go out. As soon as the gate closed, Ranofer scrambled to his feet, wincing as the abrupt movement reminded him of his soreness, and ran to the corner of the wall where cracks in the mud bricks and a straggling vine provided a precarious ladder for climbing to the top. Peering over anxiously into the street, he saw Gaboo walking eastward in the direction of the river. Ranofer waited until he was a considerable distance down the street, then jumped from his perch, ran to the gate, and let himself out cautiously. Staying close to the walls of the houses and courtyards, he followed the distant bulky figure around a corner and into the thoroughfare. Then along the thoroughfare to the beginning of the docks, where Gaboo turned into one of the several doorways set into a solid line of palm-thatched buildings and disappeared from sight. Ranofer gazed blankly at the doorway, over which hung a leather wineskin. He was both relieved and disappointed. He knew what this place was. It was Mutra's wine shop. There was nothing very mysterious about Gaboo's going in there. He went there often. Still, he might be meeting someone. This might be the place where the thieving plots were laid. It's certain I cannot follow him inside, Ranofer thought. I can watch the door, though. That is what Haket would do. I will see who he goes in to meet. Across the street, on the stone docks, was a row of overturned fishing boats, draped with nets spreading out to dry. Ranofer selected one of the small punts made of bundles of papyrus reeds bound together and crawled under it. Its sharp, pointed prow lifted it at an angle from the stone floor of the docks, and though its shelter concealed him, he could still watch the doorway easily. It was another long wait. Men came and went along the thoroughfare. Several times one went into the wine shop, and after an interval came out. Ranofer knew none of them. Wenamon did not come, nor did Setma, nor did anyone connected with any gold house, as far as he knew. The sunset light faded, the street grew dusky, and still Gaboo did not appear. A fat-bellied man waddled out of the shop with a lighted torch, thrust it into the bracket beside the door, and waddled back inside. Ranofer began to peer about uneasily, searching the deepening gloom among the boats for possible kefts. At last, when he was thoroughly stiff from his cramped position and almost ready to retreat before the coming of the night, the door of the wine shop opened. Gaboo came out and turned immediately toward home. I must get ahead of him, Ranofer thought. I must get there first, so he will not know I have been gone. But how will I do it? What if he is not going home? How can I tell unless I follow right behind him? In a panic, he crawled out from under the punt and raced silently down the street after Gaboo, who walked sturdily ahead. When he turned at the end of the thoroughfare, Ranofer was sure he could be going nowhere but back to the street of the Crooked Dog. Dodging in an alley, he ran as fast as he could until he was certain he was ahead of Gaboo. Then he crossed back into the direction of home by another street and emerged into the street of the Crooked Dog to see Gaboo still some distance away in the gloom. Ranofer flew across the street and into the courtyard, closing the gate as silently as possible behind him. An instant later, he was safe on his mat under the acacia tree, breathless and panting, but lying in an attitude of sleep. In a few moments, Gaboo came in the gate, banged it carelessly with no regard for noise, and climbed the stair to his room. Ranofer relaxed and gradually regained his breath. He felt considerably flattened by the evening's events. If this was spying, it was anything but an exhilarating occupation. What good was there in crouching under a punt all evening, watching a wine shop door? Moreover, it was no less dangerous for being dull. Still, I must keep on with it, he told himself as he settled more comfortably on his mat. This was only the first evening. Perhaps he will go someplace else tomorrow, or meet someone, or do something suspicious. Perhaps Wenamon and Setma have met tonight, and Haket will have much to tell tomorrow. He drifted off to sleep, anticipating.